So today we're going to talk about how the science behind how our brains are wired to acquire language, and why translation methods just don't work and why they should be eliminated in how we teach language. Like I said, this is like my number of things. I am the biggest language opportunities in every question. Please stop me because I'd be happy to answer your questions. So I developed a method a few years ago called Language. I'm going to plug my book. Here you go. Language with 5 senses. And the reason why I developed this method is because I was a public school teacher. And I was teaching with the same antiquated methods that are currently. And I said to myself, this isn't working. My students aren't progressing. And then I had my son Daniel, and Daniel's autistic. And he didn't speak till he was 4 years old. And I started watching the way in which Daniel worked with the speech-language pathologist. Hate kids. And we're going to talk about why songs and rhythms are a necessity. The other thing I wanted to change about our thinking, especially in the United States around language, is there's this mentality in the US that language is a box we have to check off for college, or everybody speaks English, so why should I learn another language? So there's a quote that I absolutely love. It's by Charlemagne. It's, does everybody know who Charlemagne was? Okay. To have another language is to possess a second soul. What do you think that means? Any ideas? No? Okay, there's something similar to that when you have another language. So I'm going to try to keep this as not technical, but the way in which our brains acquire language and retain language basis, language is a way to get our needs met. And it's how we interact with each other and the world around us. Language we cannot learn in a bubble. There are these programs out there called Why don't those work? They're missing one key component, and that is human connection. You cannot learn language or become fluent by yourself. You just can't. And you can't get into the deeper meaning of language, the nuances, all that makes up language, without human connection, without cultural connection, without understanding the people who speak that language. Because language is not just words and phrases, it is human beings. It's living. It changes with time, with people, with the region that the language is spoken. Perfect example. I'm French. I grew up in the United States and I grew up in France. And I just went to Montreal for the first time in my whole life. I can't believe I had never been there before, but I just went there. And what did you just say? I mean, there's little nuances. There were some expressions in bad things in French, and vice versa. So, for example, plein. Yeah, does anybody speak French in here? Plein? Oh, well, Micah, of course.
Yeah.
All right, Micah, don't ever say je suis plein, okay? And I'll tell you why. I listened to big.
Yeah.
Translation from English, and then the language in Quebec is kind of, they take what we call anglicisme and they try to keep their language by integrating the English. In France, we would say je n'ai plus faim. I'm not hungry anymore. We wouldn't say je suis plein. And the language nerd in me was fascinated by this because in Quebec, they're trying so hard to preserve the French, they're not letting it evolve. And I had this great discussion with two of my teachers who are from Quebec about it. And it was fascinating. And what I realized was, I went from this attitude, okay, they're not letting it evolve, to they're evolving it in a way that matches where they live, their environment, the English around them. As opposed to in France, where they'll drop English words into things like nothing. You know, you might say, I'm doing this for fun. Je le fais pour le fun, you know? Whereas in Quebec, you don't ever want to say that because they always have a French word. So it's always an adaptation of the part of the world that the language is being spoken. And just look at the differences in English. So we can't learn textbook language when we teach it. We have to learn real living language that we can actually use. Along these lines, because language starts with a human connection, students must be free to choose which language. The goal is to create and foster a love of learning languages. I hear so often, oh, I'm going to choose this language for my child because it is more useful than this other language. When I hear that, I look at the student themselves and say, do you want to learn Spanish? Well, no. What do you want to learn? I want to learn Korean. Great! It doesn't matter what language it is, and when a student is passionate about a language, it fosters that love of learning, and they are less likely to give up. They already have a personal connection. It doesn't matter what that connection is. It could be, I like the way it sounds. I have an ancestor that came from this area that speaks this language. It doesn't matter. I like the country. I want to visit there. And that will foster a love of language and wanting to continue learning other languages. Just because, and I get this question a lot too. I'm kind of skipping around on this, but I get this question a lot too. Will it confuse my child if they learn 3 languages at once? Nope. It's good for the brain. The more languages they learn now, will they mix them up? Yeah. Is that okay? Yes. Do you know how many bilingual and multilingual people will use a word that comes to their mind because that's the word that fits the situation the most? I do that all the time. All the time. My kids do that all the time. My 6-year-old son will come out with half a sentence in French and half in English, and sometimes he'll throw a Chinese word in there. Just the way it is. They are meant to do that. And sometimes I have people who come up to me and they say, well, my child is still learning to speak English. Great! Did you know that your child will progress more quickly if they're learning another language along with English? It's true. Because bilingual and multilingual people actually have access to more of their brains more surface of their brains. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Let's see, did I miss anything? Okay, so I'm going to show you a video. And then we're going to go over the steps of how this method works. But first I want to show you we must eliminate translation. We must eliminate it. It's a different skill. I have a very, very good friend in France. In fact, she's my son's godmother. And she is a translator. And she translates English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. You know what language she can actually speak? French, her native language. She can't speak any other language. She can read it. She can write it. She cannot speak it. True story. It's a different skill in the brain. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video. And this is a very good illustration of why translation does not work. Has anybody seen the Jimmy Fallon Google Translate songs? No. You're in for a treat.
So
you hear that?
If you've ever used Google Translate, you know it's not always perfect. For example, when we translated to Hungarian and back, the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon becomes At Night Show stars Fallon Jimmy. So we did the same thing with popular song lyrics. We're going to do some songs.
We're not going to watch the whole thing.
You're right. Yes, please. Go first. Here we go. You will be singing the Google Translate version of Can't Feel My Face by The Weeknd. Translated, it is called My Front Is Not Felt. Roots.
Her concern was given and told me her concern again was given. Together it is no celebration. What I affection with saying and told me in your presence my front is not felt.
Performing the Google Translate version of the Gloria Gaynor classic, I Will Survive.
This one is really funny.
Which is now called I Will Be Punctual.
All right, so you get the idea, right? Translation is basically, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for many, many reasons. When I show that to teachers, hold on just a second, let me put my slideshow back on here. Why isn't it going? There we go. When I show that to teachers, a lot of times they don't realize, because there's a lot of teachers who buy into the marketing of using Duolingo in the classroom or using these translation programs in the classroom. And so what I'm doing when I train teachers is kind of revolutionary, actually. Some of them reject it, and some of them are like, yes, come on. I'm actually doing an 8-hour workshop with Spanish teachers, the American Association of Teachers of Spanish. But when I show them that kind of thing, it kind of opens their mind. They're like, really? That's what it sounds like when you translate. Yes. The other thing about translation is that it makes us rely on our first language. A person who learns language through translation will never become fluent. You have to eliminate that piece. Because if I'm trying to translate, I'm focusing on every single word and not the global meaning of what's being said. And so translation really breaks that down. And that's why a lot of people, when they travel, they have a really hard time communicating what they want to say because they're so focused on getting it right. Think about people who come to the U.S. from other countries. When they make mistakes in the language, do you care as long as you understand what they're trying to get across? Exactly. We don't need to care about that if the goal is for us to be fluent. Fluency does not equal accuracy. I'm speaking to you right now with fluency. I'm speaking to you with accuracy too, because it's my native language. But think of how many English speakers don't even speak with accuracy. So it's not the same, and I think a lot of people believe that fluency is synonymous with accuracy. And that if we are not accurate, we will be judged. When in fact the opposite is the case. There's a quote that says, don't judge someone, I don't know the exact wording of the quote, but don't judge someone who has an accent or makes mistakes in another language because it means that they speak another language. It's powerful. So let's talk about some science. Anybody know what that is? Yes, okay, so they're a brain, but does anybody know exactly what they're called? This part specifically?
The synapses.
The synapses, okay, so that's that, but what about these dots? They're called dendrites. Yes. Okay, so what happens when you learn a language? First of all, the language center of your brain is the only part of your brain that actually closes off and solidifies. And so it's really hard to grow new dendrites in that part of the brain. It closes off between the age of 8 and 12. So if you start learning a language from birth to 8, you are more likely to speak with a proper accent and as a native speaker. The older you get, the less likely you are to be able to access that part of the brain. So how do we trick it? Because what happens is, every time you learn a new skill, you grow a dendrite. You grow one of these things. And then you take that skill and you apply it to something. And it grows this branch. And the more you grow the branches of your brain, the more skills you learn, the more surface of your brain you use. So if we can't access that language center of the brain after the age of between 8 and 12, what do we do? Does it mean it's all over for us? No. We have to trick it. And how we do that is we apply all of our senses to grow these dendrites in other parts of the brain that connects to the language center. Now, it's going to be easier for younger children because their brains are more pliable. But it's not impossible for adults, and in fact, a lot of adults are very uncomfortable with this method because it's not the norm. But after a while, they realize it really does work. And it takes longer. Because a lot of times we're a country that is instant gratification, right? I want it now. How many of your kids like to play tablet video games? Yes, Mike, I know. Yeah, my kids do too. So this is really like they get that instant gratification of entertainment. That's what they get on playing Duolingo. That's what they get from different apps. So it does take work. It takes years. It takes a long time. You could go through 4 years of high school language and not be the least bit fluent. You need at least 300 to 1,200 hours of listening. The younger you are, the less amount of listening you need to have. So if you think about it, we come out, we're listening. We're listening in the womb. We come out and we're listening. Did you know a baby who is 6 months old can decipher between languages? It's amazing. So why is it when we start taking a language, we expect to speak and speak right now? That's what translation gives us, is that instant gratification, but it does not stick. Does not grow those dendrites. All right, come on. All right, so I talked about why translation doesn't work. It hinders communication. It causes frustration. It can cause cultural blunders. For example, you can't say je suis excité in France. That's a translation from English. It's a very bad word. You don't want to say that. The French people will get extremely shocked at you if you do. That's one cultural blunder. But you go into Google Translate and you write in, I'm so excited to go to France. And it will say, Je suis excitée d'aller en France, which is not the right way to say it. Other things that, other cultural blunders that can happen is, you know, a lot of times you might use more formal language with people and textbook language, and they might tell you that you're talking like their grandfather or their grandmother. So translation really gives you more, less authentic language, more formal language, and you know, it teaches you things that you wouldn't normally say, those translation methods, like, I have cheese on my nose. Okay, great. That's great. You know, they'll look at you like, huh? I'm so glad. All right. So we want to focus on fluency rather than translation. And I talked about the difference between accuracy and fluency. And I define two different kinds of fluency: receptive fluency and expressive fluency. Do you know what I mean by receptive and expressive? So receptive is what the language that our brains can process and understand. Expressive fluency is what our brains can process, understand, and produce spontaneously. So what do we focus on when we're born, for like birth to 3 or birth to 5? That receptive fluency. We listen, we repeat, we sing, we dance, we read stories, we use pictures, all of that. And then, I don't know, starting about the age of 2, we come out with expressive, spontaneous language. 1 word at a time, 2 words at a time. It builds. We don't come out and go, hi mom, hi dad, I'm here, right? We really focus on building that language in the brain first. So in the first 2 years of learning a language, needs to be the focus right here, is that receptive fluency. And then, once you have that good, solid foundation, and you have that 300 to 1,200 hours of just listening, you go on to expressive fluency, where you can produce language and produce language in response to prompts, to outside stimuli, and on your own. Now let me give you a comparison about the hours of listening. A student who's in the public school system in high school, like many of us were, have 5 hours a week of language, okay, approximately. Usually public school classes are 50 minutes long. If the teacher is speaking 100% in the target language, it's 10 hours a week of listening or hearing that language. That equals about 120 hours in a school year, approximately. Now, take out school vacations. Take out the fact that it's only 9 months out of the year. Take out the fact that classes get interrupted for lots of reasons in the public school. All of those factors. And the fact that in most classes, both public and private school across the United States, the teachers are not speaking 100% in the target language. So, that dwindles down. It takes a long time to become fluent. A long time. And in fact, it is a lifetime of learning language because you're constantly progressing. Any questions so far? Okay. So, we must start learning language earlier, but it's never too late. It's always a good idea to start young. The younger the better. I told you about that pliable brain, right? We must mimic how we learn our first language. I'm going to show you how this works in just a few minutes. We talked about how you learned your first language. Babies come out crying. That's how they talk. As a mom, all of you are moms in here, I assume, because you're here. You know what's the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry and a hurt cry, right? You know how to hear your baby's language. Then there's a smile. The baby is constantly trying to connect with you as a human. That's one thing that I missed with my son Daniel. Being autistic, we really struggled with that. So it was such a joy when I had Noah, my younger son, to see those real efforts at making human connection with the family. So this is the process. Our lessons, when I teach, the lesson goes like this. I listen. The students, we just simply listen to language. And when the students are listening, we're doing actions. We're moving our bodies. We put the language to rhythm. We give them chunks of language. So we're going to try this, okay? And Mike has done this before. So we are going to learn a greeting, okay? So we're going to start out with Bonjour, je m'appelle Elisabeth. Je m'appelle Elisabeth. Comment tu t'appelles? Je m'appelle Elisabeth. Comment tu t'appelles?
Candace.
Candace, you say. Je m'appelle
Oh,
Candace.
sorry. I missed the cue.
Je m'appelle Candace. Okay. Je m'appelle Elisabeth. Elle s'appelle Candace. Comment tu t'appelles?
Je m'appelle Tamara.
Elle s'appelle Tamara. Elle s'appelle Candace. Je m'appelle Elisabeth. And we would do this around. Okay? Then I might be like, Je m'appelle Elisabeth. Comment tu t'appelles? And you would say,
Leah.
Elle s'appelle Leah. Comment tu t'appelles? Okay? What that does is when you put language to a rhythm, it goes directly into your long-term memory. So we do this is called a clap snap. Yep. These are my students back here. So the clap snap, what it does is, it doesn't matter what the gesture is. I mean, you could do a gesture like if I teach the word la chimie, chemistry, I might go right like that. But it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be anything associated. What happens is that you are using kinesthetics, you are moving your body, you are using a rhythm, and it's going straight into your long-term memory. So for example, a lot of times when I teach students foods, I'll teach them how to order something in a bakery. Une baguette, s'il vous plaît. Une baguette, s'il vous plaît. Je voudrais une baguette, s'il vous plaît. Now, say they're in France and they go into a bakery and they walk up. They're going to go, okay, une baguette, s'il vous plaît, because they remember it. Now, if you were using a translation method, you might have to think about it and go, okay, want. Une baguette, je voudrais, okay? You see the difference? Une baguette, s'il vous plaît. And that's all you have to say in France is the thing and s'il vous plaît. It's not even that complicated. But a lot of times we overanalyze, we overthink it, when the answer is so simple, and it's right there. The next part is I draw. So we use pictures with words. We never use a word in French with a word in English, a word in Korean with a word in English. We have 12 languages in our school. So the excellent thing about this is I'm giving them, as we're drawing, what's called comprehensible input. Has anybody heard of comprehensible input before? Yeah, this is a language teacher term. So what I'm doing is, I'm a terrible artist. Terrible, but I don't care. Because it doesn't matter how good or bad of an artist you are, the point is to have the students drawing what you draw while they listen to you speaking. And what this does is it adds a kinesthetic piece to it too, but the comprehensible input part is, if I'm drawing a man, and I'm teaching the word un homme, I'm saying, oh, the man, he has a head. Oh, he's got brown hair. He's wearing a blue shirt. He's wearing jeans. He's wearing brown shoes. And I'm giving them all this language, and they're watching me draw it, and they understand what I'm saying. The point is not to focus on every word being spoken, but the global meaning of what is being said. And you can understand way, way more than you can actually say in the beginning. Did you know that you only hear in your native language 17 to 25% of the words that are actually being spoken? Because you're listening to for global meaning. You're not listening to every single word I'm saying. It's true. It's the truth. The next one is I play. So we all know that we learn the best when we're having fun, right? We don't realize we're learning. We play a lot of games. We play games that teach the skills in the language. So we might play Kahoot or Quizlet Live, which is the favorite. The kids love to compete against each other. Anytime you can get kids competing against each other in a language, they are going to learn. I guarantee it. I get asked, please, please Kahoot, please Quizlet Live, please, please, please. We have things like simply like Hangman, or, bingo, or any type of memory game. I mean, any type of game where you're playing. I have this one when I teach in a regular brick and mortar classroom. It's sad because this is one of the things I miss about a brick and mortar classroom that I can't do online. But like, for example, colors or numbers or whatever, I will put up on the wall cards with whatever I'm having them do, and they line up in 2 lines, and I call out a color, for example. They run up, and grab it before the other one and run back. They love that kind of stuff. We play Twister, We used to play Twister. And I've adapted some of our games for online because that's what our school is online. But like we had a game called Tapet, and we have this program that we use called Class Kick, and I'll put like numbers, and I'll say circle this number. And sometimes we'll have them play in partners together. So anytime they're playing. The last one is the second to last one is I create. So I am a teacher who prefers performance-based assessment. That's what I have my admin credential in, actually, is curriculum and performance-based assessment. In my other life, I was a curriculum specialist in the district where I worked. And so I would rather students, instead of memorizing and regurgitating, I would rather have them apply the language that they're learning and the skills that they're learning in a practical manner. So we want them doing things that actually apply the language, so they would make a project. So one of the projects that, we do simple projects sometimes we do more complicated projects. We might have a cooking project. I might have them follow directions with pictures and create an art project. Anything that has them using the skills that we were learning in that unit. And along with that, we teach in thematic units. So they're not just randomly learning language. It has a purpose, it has a context. And the last one is I taste and smell. Taste and smell? How do you do that in language? Food.
We love that one.
I don't know any teacher, any language teacher on this earth who doesn't use food in the classroom. In fact, I've got teachers who get up in front of their cameras and cook with their students. I used to do that a long time ago, get up in front of the camera and cook with my students. But yeah, the importance of food. Food is an initiation into culture, but it is also incredibly linguistically rich. Earlier I was talking about the grocery store and how linguistically rich that is. You go to a grocery store in another country and everything is labeled. But also food, following a recipe, following directions. I mean, a lot of times when we have a cookbook coming out, each of our teachers has contributed a recipe from their country, and we're going to put it out as a cookbook. And what we're going to do is we're going to do it in English, but one of the other ones that we're going to also do one in the language, and you're going to have a picture with the instructions, and we do that a lot. I think my pizza recipe was like that, pictures with instructions. And it's linguistically rich because you're learning to follow a process, you're learning to follow directions, and because there's pictures there, that's that comprehensible input and what we call clues for understanding, so that you can see the context and what you're supposed to do. Humans bond over food. Think about it. Every country has a tradition that is around food or etiquette or the table or something of that matter. In France, whenever I'm in France, it's my happy place. I'm going there in 3 weeks. I always go to my friends' houses for dinner, and we will sit there long after the meal is over just talking. People bond over food. Food can be adventurous. You have a picky eater, have them go find something they want to try that's new. Help them get out of their comfort zone a little bit. And if food creates sensory memories that connect us in some way to experience, places, and people. So my grandfather used to make spaghetti sauce. And his spaghetti sauce is famous. He used to make it, and he lived with us for a long time. I think he moved in with us when I was 10 probably 11 or 12. And he lived with us until he died when I was 26 or 27. And he used to make spaghetti sauce a lot. And when he died, nobody could figure out how to make this spaghetti sauce. So a year or so ago, my mother got in touch with one of the Italian cousins, and she had the spaghetti sauce recipe. And my mom made the spaghetti sauce, and all of a sudden I was taken back to cooking spaghetti sauce with my grandpa. Now, he would have me cook it with him in the house, but I could never make it the same way. But it was a memory. Whenever I smelled cultured butter, has anybody smelled cultured butter? Oh my gosh, you must. It's what they have in Europe. It takes me back to me sitting in my favorite cafe with my croissant, and they really do eat croissant for breakfast, trust me, it's delicious. And dipping it in my coffee. Does anyone else have a memory like that they would like to share? Go ahead.
Well, as a kid, I also have the same, we must have had the same grandfather, because it was the same thing for every Sunday was making pasta and sauce. But I've traveled with my children, and I can tell you normally within, like, when we were traveling, within 30 hours of being in whatever country we were, particularly my daughter could name the food she wanted in that language with a smile to these people, and she got whatever she wanted in shops and bakeries and restaurants, and she knew how to say the particular name of a cookie she liked, or sweet, or bread, any bread type items, mostly is what her specialty is. But I mean, it was amazing to see how quickly both my children over food could discuss.
It's true. Food is one of the most linguistically rich things out there. I go to the grocery store. I'm probably the only one who ever does this, but I go to the grocery store and I'll be sitting there looking at something or listening to people talk, and I'll be like, I could make an activity out of this. I mean, seriously. It's an authentic activity. One of the activities I have for my high school students is go on a scavenger hunt of the grocery store. I give them a list of words. They have to find it, and they have to take a picture of it, and of them holding it. So, can you imagine these kids going through the grocery store and like picking this up and like, it's funny. They love it though. They think it's hilarious.
We're homeschool moms, so
right, and you know what? These are things that I could not do in the public school. So that's why I started my schools, because I wanted the freedom to be able to teach in the way that I knew was authentic. And do you know how many public school students I have coming to my school now? Because they're getting an experience that they wouldn't normally get there. Okay, so this is just a little illustration. I didn't make this. I have a friend named Franck Briquet, and he is a language teacher in Lafayette, at Lafayette French School in Kansas City. And he does a lot of language through song. So you know my Poisson Rouge song. Je suis un poisson rouge, j'ai perdu ma couleur. Je suis un poisson rouge, je cherche ma couleur. That song is from Franck Briquet. And this is the traditional language learning. So language in the traditional lesson, which is a translation method, it goes into the short-term memory. But when you learn through song and rhythm, it goes directly into your long-term memory. So that means you will be able to recall it more readily and keep it for longer. All right. So the last thing I have to share with you, I actually didn't go over on this one. I have time for questions. Is that I have a lot of this written in the book. So here it is right here. I'm so proud of this. I have to tell you. And I just published 4 workbooks as well. And I've been working like crazy on those. So, thank you. So does anyone have any questions of anything that I didn't cover or want to know more about something? Go ahead.
I don't have a question, I just have a funny story.
Sure.
You were talking about the music. My daughter just discovered some show on Netflix that she keeps bugging her sister about, and it's a show about Spanish kids at like a singing competition, and so she watches it in Spanish.
It's one of they're in Argentina.
It's called Go.
Yeah, they're in Argentina.
Yeah.
We watched that.
And so
too.
I just hear like all these songs, and like she's like picking it up and like having all these like Spanish
That's
words and
cool.
just talking to me. I'm like, oh, good to see. You're already working
And-
on learning.
And see, yeah, absolutely. And to that end, it just made me think of something that I usually mention, and that is, you know, a good way to initiate language and to see which language fits is to have kids watch things or listen to music in that language and take off the subtitles. Because what happens is if you put subtitles on, your brain is not even going to hear the language. It's going to default to the English. And so just having them, again, use what I call clues for understanding, context, pictures, all of that, to figure out what's going on in the show. I mean, my sons sit there and watch YouTube in like Russian sometimes, just because. I mean, they find something they like to watch and they'll just watch it. But you know, when your mom owns a language school, you kind of take all the languages anyway, right? So, yeah, that's a great point. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to come back to my question at the beginning. I think you've explained it a little bit, but how are you overseeing that the teachers that are teaching, I'm assuming you only speak French, teach the French classes,
Yes.
but are teaching with this same encompassing idea?
Yes, okay, so that's a great question. So first of all, I vet my teachers very well. There are some times when I find that a teacher is not teaching with that method, and that teacher is not with us very long. There's been a couple of cases of it this year. Typically what we do is we have department chairs in place now that oversee the different language departments, because we have 12 languages and it's really hard for me to manage 25 teachers on my own. So we have department chairs, and what we do is we do some kind of mediation. So I am constantly watching the teachers' videos. I'm popping into their classes. They'll know if I'm, sometimes they won't even know I'm coming. Sometimes they don't even know I'm there. So I'm constantly watching them. And if I see something, I will have a talk with them about it and say, you need to go back into training. We make an appointment. Now our department chairs take over that. The department chairs are people who have been with us the longest. So I have had teachers employed by me now since 2017, no, spring 2018, right? We're in 2019, right? Oh my goodness. So about about a year and a half. So the teachers who have really gotten to know the method, and they're usually teachers. All of our teachers who are department chairs are also were also trained in Europe, which is where this method is used the most. The second thing is all of our teachers, except for 2, are native speakers. And so they're instructed only to use English when teaching culture, because in the early years we want the students to really get a profound understanding of culture. By the time we get to the 3rd year, which Mike is almost there, you're not going to have English anymore in your class. So I really make sure, and the other thing is that all my teachers are certified teachers. And people ask me all the time, well, does that matter? Well, yes, it does, because language acquisition and language teaching are so specialized. And a lot of times I really have to think hard, and this is going to sound really bad because we're in the United States, but I have to think hard about hiring a teacher from the U.S. Just because we're so antiquated in our method and the world has moved way beyond that. And I do have some teachers who are better at upper levels. Micah had a teacher this year that had to have quite a bit of remediation, but she's going to go to the upper level classes. And you know, I try to put the right teacher in the right level, and if it's not the right fit for that level, we move them the next semester. So I have very high standards for my teachers. They know that coming in. They receive extensive training before they start teaching, and like I said, many of them have been teaching with a similar method for years already. Go ahead.
How many adults do you have? Do you teach versus children?
Yeah, so we have an adult program, but it's not super successful, and the reason why is because a lot of times our adults will start, they'll get busy, or something will come up and they won't come to class, and so there's not really the consistency there to learn the language. I mean, you've really got to be consistent with it if you're going to learn. We do have a couple of adult classes, but again, we haven't had a lot that have gone through the whole program. And like I said, it's not because of us or whatever, it's just timing, scheduling.
I know there's, in Micah's classes, there's been quite a few parents that they make sure they're safe. Like, I see their arms on the screen too. Like we said, oh, she's there today.
Yeah.
And we'll message each other. I message about a quarter all the time during the classes and stuff, so.
Oh, okay, so you're picked out off the screen?
Well,
No.
my son's on the screen here, and I'm sitting right next to him, like, you can see me grabbing my coffee.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally encourage that, actually. I think it's great for the parents to sit in, because I like to see that the parents are invested and involved with their kids. The only thing I will have to say is we've had a couple of issues in the past where parents are sitting there translating to their kids whatever I'm saying. And I've had to call them out on it. And I'll mute their mic if they're doing that, because I don't want the other students hearing that. But I really like the fact that parents are involved with their kids in class, will sit in, and I encourage that, actually. Did you have a question?
I did. In your program, like I have 2 children that are like 16 months apart.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there a way to do 2 students at one time?
Yep.
Or is it 2 different screens?
So I have students do it. We have families that do it different ways. I've had families who have shared one screen. I've had families who have done different computers in different rooms. The only thing is we can't have 2 computers in the same room because we get feedback. But what I do say is that each student that participates has to have a separate login into our online classroom, and it's usually useful if you have some other type of device like a phone or a tablet, because we do use some technology that it's hard to do if you're on one computer. It can be done. I mean, I've had students share it before, but it's not a huge deal if they're sharing, for sure. Yeah. Yep.
So obviously, you having a language school,
Uh-huh.
you know, you're kind of focused on that, but what would you say, how can, like, a homeschool mom who isn't fluent in the language their kid is teaching best
Right here.
use these ideas, like, and how to utilize that when you, yeah.
I use her school, that's how I do it.
Yeah, I will say that language is one of those things that's really hard to do if you're not a fluent speaker and you are not a language teacher. I mean, there are lots of programs out there that they'll hire a native speaker, but that's not enough because a native speaker doesn't necessarily know how to teach the language or understand the structure of the language. I mean, in the United States, in most public school systems, they don't even teach grammar anymore. And so, yeah, and you know, I'm having to teach my kids grammar because they're not learning it. And so, so I can't tell you how many kids come into my class and don't know what a noun, a verb, an adjective, you know, what those are. So it's really important to find a program that has, whether it's, you know, mine, obviously mine's the best, you know, but whether it's mine or somebody else's, where you have, that's one spot where you want to have an expert teaching it. Now, if you just want to have introduction to your kids, some people are like, well, I just want to introduce it. Some ways to do it: listening to music, having them watch shows, video, whatever in the language. You know, I always say put on a Disney movie and take off the subtitles, because give them something that they know first to hear the languages so that they know the story, they know what's going on, but they're just listening to the language.
I've been tempted to try and, my daughter has a native speaker that she talks to and learns stuff with, but then I don't even, like, I am always nervous even to try to reinforce anything that I hear her doing, because I'm like, I'm going to say it wrong, and then she's just going to learn it with,
yeah,
you know.
That I wouldn't worry about. I think, but I do think at the same time, you know, learning along with her is a good idea. Definitely. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well, with that, it's like, she gives us all the tools to reinforce these things outside of the classroom. So we got a 4 or 5 page cookbook to print, and it's in our kitchen. We keep it in our kitchen, and we went through and picked out what recipes he had required 2, I think, and he chose 3 too, and we did it, and took our pictures to show that we did it and everything. And but also from that, like, we have some new traditions because we are taking on traditions that we learned. I don't think we're ever gonna have a Christmas Eve without a Yule log now.
Did you actually make it?
No.
See, I don't make mine either. In France, they buy them, and I have tried so many times, and I just cannot. I can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we went for the French approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you have Chinese?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. My kids are learning Chinese right now.
Son has been adamant for years to learn Chinese. I'm like,
Yep.
that's like one of the hardest languages.
We have the best Chinese teacher. She's so wonderful. I mean, all of our Chinese teachers are wonderful, but I'm particularly fond of the one my kids have. So, yep.
Just based off what she said and what I've heard a lot, is that like Chinese is one of the hardest languages to learn. What would you say to that?
I don't think any language is any harder than any others. I really don't. You know, there are languages that have stricter grammar. There are languages that are more technical. There are languages that don't write with our alphabet, like Chinese. What I learned about Chinese just by standing over the shoulder of my children while they're learning is that the Chinese characters are based on pictures. Same with the Arabic characters. The way that they write the word for rabbit looks like a rabbit. So when they teach it in that way, it's pretty easy for kids to make connections. I think that what makes a language difficult is when you don't have that personal connection to it to begin with. And then you lose motivation. So that's my opinion. I think that, you know, there are differing opinions on that, but that's fine. Yeah. Go ahead.
Am I right that I saw that you offer Latin
Yes.
as well? Okay, I can probably ask you at the booth. I was just wondering how is it and it's taught in the same way.
Yeah, so our
because we've been studying Latin for
Yeah.
years, but clearly just on the page and relating
Yeah.
to.
So Latin is a little different because it is not a living language. However, our Latin teacher is so funny. I love her. She belongs to a group of people who have modernized Latin. So they make up words based on the rules of Latin that are more modern words. So like they would call an airplane an aeroplano or something like that. Now I studied Latin because that was part of my linguistics degree, and it's true, like I learned it by reading it, and that's pretty much how I learned it. But she uses lingua latina for her text, but she does a lot of, you know, living language type things.
That's
So
hilarious.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, she is. She's so funny. I love her. Yep.
With your program, how often do you meet?
So it depends on the age of the child. We can do for our kindergarten, elementary classes. Kindergarten's 1 day a week. Elementary classes can be 1 or 2 days a week, and then middle school, high school are 1, 2, or 3 days a week. And then they have work that they can do in between classes. And the goal is that the parents don't have to do the work. We give the kids the tools to do the work. Now, a lot of times we'll put instructions in English so that parents can kind of navigate it, that are helping. But yeah, and you know, our teachers are pretty good about getting back to parents. Our policy in the school is 24 hours. Now, some of our teachers have had to be talked to about, especially our French teachers and our Italian teachers, because they are on French and Italian time. But you know, pretty much there's help from our live teachers. Any other questions? All right, go ahead.
And teach from whatever, like we teach from different countries.
They're all over the place, yeah. So we only have 3 teachers that are outside of the U.S. The rest are in the U.S. But
Time-wise.
yeah, so all of our classes are in Pacific time, and then the teachers, like I have teachers on the East Coast, so they just adjust. So the class is at 9 o'clock. Well, they would log in at noon their time, basically. Any other questions? All right, well, if you have any other questions, I would be happy to talk with you. Come see me. I'm out in the vendor hall, and I'm talking again tomorrow on global citizenship education. I think that's at 11:30, I want to say 11:30 in this room. And if you're interested in my book, I have it here too. Anyway, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of the conference.